The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m., but Sarah Martinez was already awake. She had been staring at the ceiling for the past hour, her mind racing with worries that never seemed to stop. The small apartment was cold because she had turned down the heat to save money. Winter was coming and the heating bills would get bigger. She could not afford to pay more than she already was. Sarah rolled out of bed and walked quietly to the kitchen. Her 6-year-old son Tommy was still sleeping in the only bedroom. She slept on the old couch in the living room. The couch was uncomfortable and made her back hurt, but Tommy needed the bed more than she did. He was growing fast and needed good sleep for school. She made a cup of cheap coffee and looked at the bills on the kitchen table. The rent notice was still there, bright red letters saying "Final Notice" across the top. She owed $300 and had only 2 weeks to pay. She had counted her money 5 times last night, but the numbers never changed. She was always short, no matter how hard she worked. Sarah put on her cleaning uniform and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. At 28 years old, she looked much older. Her face was tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were rough from cleaning chemicals and washing dishes. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail because she had no time to make it look nice. Before leaving, she kissed Tommy's forehead while he slept. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. He did not know how much his mother worried about money every single day. She wanted to keep it that way. Children should not have to worry about adult problems. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, would watch Tommy before school. The old woman was kind and never asked for money, but Sarah always tried to give her something. Mrs. Chen had her own problems with a small pension, but she never complained. She understood what it was like to struggle. Sarah's first job was cleaning offices downtown. She took 2 buses to get there, which took almost an hour each way. The cleaning company paid minimum wage, but they let her work early morning hours before her second job. She scrubbed floors, emptied trash, and cleaned bathrooms in tall office buildings. The work was hard, but she was grateful to have it. While cleaning, Sarah often looked at the business people who came to work later in the morning. They wore expensive clothes and carried fancy coffee cups. They talked on phones about deals and meetings. Sarah wondered what it would feel like to have that kind of life, where money was not a constant worry. Her supervisor, Mr. Rodriguez, was a good man who understood her situation. He sometimes gave her extra hours when other cleaners called in sick. Every extra dollar helped, even though it meant less sleep and more exhaustion. Sarah never complained and always did her work well. She could not afford to lose this job. After cleaning, Sarah rushed to her second job at Danny's Diner. The restaurant was in a busy part of town, and she worked there from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Her feet hurt from standing all day, and the smell of grease got into her clothes and hair. But the tips were good when customers were happy, and she worked hard to make them smile. The diner was owned by an older couple, Maria and Danny Gonzalez. They were kind to Sarah and understood she was doing her best. They let her take home leftover food sometimes, which helped her grocery budget. Tommy loved the chocolate cake that was sometimes left over from the day. During her break at the diner, Sarah called to check on Tommy. He was at school, but she worried about him constantly. He was a smart boy, but she knew he needed things she could not buy. New clothes, school supplies, toys that other kids had. She wanted to give him everything, but there was never enough money. The lunch rush was always busy. Sarah served coffee, took orders, and cleaned tables as fast as she could. Her uniform was old and had small holes that she had sewn closed many times. Her shoes were worn out, but new ones cost money she did not have. She smiled at customers even when her feet hurt and her back ached. One customer, a businessman in an expensive suit, was rude to her. He complained about everything and left no tip. Sarah wanted to cry, but she held back her tears. She could not afford to get upset at customers, even the mean ones. She needed this job too much. As the day went on, Sarah felt more and more tired. She had been working 14-hour days for months, and her body was starting to break down. She drank coffee to stay awake, but it only helped for a little while. Her hands shook sometimes from exhaustion and too much caffeine. After work, Sarah walked to the bus stop in the dark. The city streets were busy with people going home from their jobs. She envied the people who looked relaxed and happy. They probably went home to nice houses and had money in their bank accounts. They probably did not lie awake at night counting bills and worrying about rent. The bus was crowded with tired workers like herself. Sarah found a seat and pulled out the rent notice from her purse. She read it again, hoping the words would somehow change. But they stayed the same. $300. 2 weeks. Final notice. She thought about calling her ex-husband Mark, but she knew it was useless. He had not sent child support in over a year. He had moved to another state and started a new life. He had forgotten about Tommy and the promises he made when they were married. Sarah had given up on him long ago. As the bus moved through the city, Sarah felt her eyes getting heavy. She had been running on only 3 hours of sleep for weeks. Her body was exhausted, her mind was tired, and her heart was heavy with worry. She tried to stay awake, but the gentle movement of the bus was like a lullaby. The man sitting next to her was wearing an expensive suit and working on his phone. He looked successful and important. Sarah hoped he would not mind if she rested her eyes for just a moment. She was so tired, and tomorrow would be another long day of work and worry. As the bus continued through the evening traffic, Sarah's exhaustion finally won. Her eyes closed, and despite her best efforts to stay awake, she began to drift off to sleep. Her head started to nod, and slowly, without realizing it, she leaned toward the stranger sitting beside her. Little did Sarah know that this moment of exhaustion would change her life forever. Sarah's head slowly tilted to the right as sleep took over her tired body. She had been fighting to stay awake, but 14 hours of work had drained every bit of energy from her. Her eyelids felt heavy like stones, and the gentle rocking of the bus made it impossible to resist sleep any longer. Without knowing it, her head came to rest on the shoulder of the man sitting next to her. David Chen felt the soft weight against his shoulder and looked down in surprise. A young woman with tired features had fallen asleep against him. Her face looked peaceful for the first time all day, and David could see the deep exhaustion written in every line around her eyes. Her work uniform was wrinkled and showed signs of a long, hard day. Her hands, which rested in her lap, were red and rough from manual labor. David's first thought was to wake her up gently. This was not normal bus behavior, and he was an important businessman with calls to make and emails to answer. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the way she looked so completely worn out, or maybe it was the small holes in her uniform that had been carefully sewn with different colored thread. Whatever it was, David decided to let her sleep. He carefully shifted his position to make his shoulder more comfortable for her. David was wearing his most expensive suit, a gray wool blend that cost more than most people made in a month. The fabric was soft and warm, and he could feel the woman relax against him as she fell into deeper sleep. He noticed other passengers looking at them with curiosity, but he did not care what they thought. David Chen was 35 years old and the owner of Chen Industries, one of the city's most successful technology companies. He was worth millions of dollars and usually traveled by private car or taxi. But today his driver was sick and his car was in the shop. Taking the bus was something he had not done in years, not since he was a struggling college student working 3 jobs to pay for school. As the bus moved through traffic, David found himself studying the sleeping woman's face. She looked young, maybe in her late 20s, but stress had aged her beyond her years. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and he could see gray streaks that were too early for someone her age. Her uniform had a name tag that read Sarah and showed she worked at Danny's Diner, a place David had never heard of. David's phone buzzed with messages from his assistant about important meetings and business deals. Normally, he would answer immediately. His company was in the middle of buying another business, and there were contracts to review and calls to make. But sitting here with this exhausted stranger sleeping on his shoulder, those things suddenly seemed less important. He thought about his own past and how hard his mother had worked when he was young. His father had left when David was 10, and his mother cleaned houses and worked in restaurants to support them. She often came home so tired she could barely speak, but she never complained. She always made sure David had what he needed for school and encouraged him to study hard so he could have a better life. David remembered riding the bus with his mother when he was a child. She would fall asleep on his shoulder after long days of work, just like this woman was doing now. He remembered how small and tired his mother looked, and how much he wanted to take care of her when he grew up. By the time he became successful enough to help her, she had passed away from cancer. He never got the chance to repay her for all her sacrifices. Looking at Sarah, David felt that same protective feeling he had wanted to give his mother. This woman was clearly working hard to survive, probably supporting a family, and deserving of kindness rather than judgment. He decided that the business calls could wait a few more minutes. Other passengers on the bus began to notice the unusual sight. A man in an expensive suit, clearly wealthy and important, was letting a tired worker sleep on his shoulder. Some people smiled at the kindness they were seeing. Others took pictures with their phones, though David did not notice. An elderly woman sitting across from them nodded approvingly and whispered to her husband about what a good man the businessman must be. Sarah shifted slightly in her sleep, and David adjusted his position again to keep her comfortable. He noticed that her breathing had become slow and regular, the breathing of someone who had not slept properly in a long time. Her face had relaxed, and for a moment, she looked younger and less worried. David wondered when she had last gotten a full night's sleep. As the bus continued its route, David found himself thinking about his employees at Chen Industries. He paid them well and offered good benefits, but he wondered if any of them were struggling like this woman. He had grown up poor, but success had separated him from that world. He lived in a big house in the suburbs, ate at expensive restaurants, and had forgotten what it felt like to worry about money. The bus driver, an older man named Joe, looked in his mirror and saw what was happening. He had been driving city buses for 20 years and had seen all kinds of people, rich and poor, kind and mean, happy and sad. But he had never seen anything quite like this. The rich man in the expensive suit was being genuinely kind to a stranger who needed help. Joe decided to drive a little more carefully, avoiding sudden stops that might wake the sleeping woman. A teenage girl sitting nearby watched the scene with interest. She was studying for a test and had been feeling sorry for herself about her homework. But seeing this tired woman who was probably working multiple jobs to support her family made the girl realize how lucky she was. She put away her phone and went back to studying, feeling grateful for her education and opportunities. As they approached the next stop, more passengers got on the bus. The new riders saw the strange sight of the businessman and the sleeping worker, and word spread quietly through the bus. People began to speak in whispers so they would not disturb Sarah's rest. The atmosphere on the bus became gentler, more caring, as people witnessed this act of simple human kindness. David checked his watch and realized Sarah had been sleeping for almost an hour. His shoulder was getting stiff, but he did not want to wake her. She clearly needed this rest more than he needed to make phone calls. He thought about how different their lives were and how unfair it seemed that some people had to work so hard just to survive while others, like himself, had more money than they could ever spend. The bus was getting closer to the downtown area where many passengers would get off. David wondered where Sarah lived and hoped it was not too far. He also began to wonder about her story. Did she have children? Was she married? What had brought her to this point of exhaustion and struggle? As these thoughts filled his mind, David felt Sarah beginning to stir. Her breathing changed and she started to shift position. After an hour of peaceful sleep, she was starting to wake up. Sarah's eyes opened slowly, and for a moment she felt confused. She was warm and comfortable, more rested than she had felt in months. But as her mind became clear, she realized something was very wrong. She was not at home on her uncomfortable couch. She was on the bus and her head was resting on someone's shoulder. Panic shot through Sarah's body like electricity. She jerked upright so fast that her neck hurt and her face turned bright red with embarrassment. She had fallen asleep on a complete stranger. Not just any stranger, but a man in an expensive suit who was clearly important and wealthy. She wanted to disappear into the floor of the bus. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Sarah said, her voice shaking with shame. "I didn't mean to. I was just so tired. Please forgive me." She started gathering her purse and the few belongings she had with her, ready to move to another seat or even get off the bus early. She had never been so embarrassed in her entire life. But the man next to her did something unexpected. Instead of looking angry or disgusted, he smiled gently at her. His eyes were kind, not annoyed. "Please don't apologize," he said in a calm voice. "You looked like you needed the rest. I hope you feel a little better now." Sarah stopped moving and stared at him in surprise. She had expected him to be upset or rude. Rich people usually did not like being bothered by people like her. But this man seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being. She did not know what to say. I'm really sorry," she said again, still red-faced. "I work 2 jobs and I haven't been sleeping much. I didn't mean to bother you. Your suit, did I wrinkle it? I can pay for cleaning." She started reaching for her wallet, even though she knew she could not afford to pay for cleaning an expensive suit. "Please stop," the man said softly. "You don't need to pay for anything. The suit is fine and you weren't bothering me at all. My name is David Chen." He held out his hand for her to shake. Sarah shook his hand automatically, still feeling shocked by his kindness. "I'm Sarah Martinez," she said quietly. Then something about his name made her pause. David Chen. That name sounded familiar. Where had she heard it before? Suddenly her eyes went wide with recognition. David Chen. She had seen that name in the newspaper business section. She had heard it on the radio news. David Chen was the CEO of Chen Industries, one of the biggest companies in the city. He was a millionaire, maybe even a billionaire. And she had just spent an hour drooling on his shoulder. "Wait," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you the David Chen? The one who owns Chen Industries?" She felt like she might faint. This was worse than just embarrassing herself in front of a stranger. She had embarrassed herself in front of one of the most powerful men in the city. David nodded with a gentle smile. "Yes, that's me. But please don't let that change anything. You needed rest and I was happy to help. We're all just people trying to get through our days." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had read about David Chen in the newspaper. He was famous for being smart and successful. He lived in a huge house and drove expensive cars. And here she was, a nobody who cleaned toilets and served coffee, having fallen asleep on him like he was her personal pillow. "I can't believe this is happening," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Chen. I know you're important and busy and I'm just a waitress. I don't even have a college degree. I shouldn't have." She started to stand up again, but David gently touched her arm. "Please sit," he said. "And please call me David. You're not just anything. You work harder than most people I know. I saw your uniform from Danny's Diner. I know that's not easy work. And you said you have 2 jobs? That takes strength and dedication." Sarah sat back down, still feeling like she was in a dream. "You're not angry at me?" she asked, unable to believe what was happening. "Angry? Why would I be angry?" David said. "You were exhausted from working hard to support yourself and probably your family. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I respect it. I grew up poor, and I remember how hard my mother worked. She used to fall asleep on the bus all the time after long days of cleaning other people's houses." This information shocked Sarah even more. David Chen had grown up poor. He understood what her life was like. She had assumed all rich people were born wealthy and never had to struggle. But here was one of the most successful men in the city, telling her he had lived through the same kind of hardship she was experiencing now. "You grew up poor?" Sarah asked, her voice full of surprise. "Very poor," David said. "My father left when I was 10 and my mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I remember eating cereal for dinner sometimes because that was all we had. I worked in restaurants and cleaned offices to pay for college. I know exactly how tired you must be right now." Sarah felt a connection to this man that she had not expected. He was not looking down on her or judging her. He understood her struggle because he had lived it himself. For the first time in months, she felt like someone truly understood what her life was like. "I have a 6-year-old son," Sarah found herself saying. "Tommy, I'm trying to give him a better life, but it's so hard. The rent is due and I'm short. On money again. I work from early morning until late at night, but it's never enough. She did not know why she was telling him all this. Maybe it was because he seemed to really understand, or maybe because she was so tired of carrying all the worry by herself. David listened carefully to every word. He could see the pain in Sarah's eyes, the exhaustion that went deeper than just being sleepy. This was the tiredness that came from months or years of struggling without any hope of things getting better. "How old is Tommy?" David asked. 6, Sarah said, and her face lit up a little when she talked about her son. "He's so smart. He loves reading and math. He wants to be a scientist when he grows up. I just want to make sure he gets the chances. I never had." "He's lucky to have a mother who works so hard for him," David said. "My mother did the same for me, and it made all the difference in my life." The bus was approaching Sarah's stop, and she started to get ready to leave. But David was not finished talking. An idea was forming in his mind, something that could change both their lives. He had been looking for someone to help with a special project at his company, someone who understood what working people really needed. Maybe this meeting on the bus was not just an accident. "Sarah," David said as she started to stand up, "would you mind if I asked you something?" Sarah looked at him curiously. "Of course, Mr. Chen. I mean David. Would you be interested in hearing about a job opportunity?" Sarah froze halfway between sitting and standing. "A job opportunity?" she repeated, her voice filled with confusion. She looked around the bus as if someone might be playing a joke on her. Things like this did not happen to people like her. Rich, successful men did not offer jobs to tired waitresses they met on buses. "Yes," David said, pulling out his wallet and taking out a business card. The card was thick and expensive looking, with his name printed in gold letters. "I've been looking for someone to run a new program at my company. Someone who understands what working families really need." Sarah stared at the business card like it might disappear if she looked away. David Chen, Chief Executive Officer, Chen Industries. The address was in the fancy business district downtown, where she cleaned offices early in the morning. She had walked past his building many times, never imagining she would ever meet the man who owned it, let alone that he would offer her a job. "I don't understand," Sarah said, still holding the card with shaking hands. "What kind of program?" "I don't have a college degree. I've never worked in an office, I just clean buildings and serve food. Why would you want to hire me?" David smiled at her honesty. Most people he met tried to impress him with fancy words and false confidence. Sarah's genuine confusion and humble nature reminded him why he had been drawn to help her in the first place. "That's exactly why I want to hire you," David explained. "I need someone who has lived the life that many of my employees are living. Someone who knows what it's like to worry about rent, to work multiple jobs, to struggle to take care of a family. I want to create programs that really help people. Not programs that look good on paper but don't solve real problems." The bus was getting closer to Sarah's stop, but she could not think about getting off. Her mind was spinning with questions and disbelief. "What kind of programs?" she asked. "Employee assistance programs," David said. "Things like emergency financial help, childcare assistance, job training, health and wellness support. I have the money to help, but I need someone who understands what help people actually need. Someone who has been there." Sarah felt her heart beating fast. This sounded too good to be true. "But I don't know anything about running programs or working in a big company," she said. "I wouldn't know where to start." "You would learn," David said. "We would train you. And you already know the most important part. You know what it's like to need help. That's something you can't learn from books or business school." The bus stopped and Sarah realized this was her stop. She needed to get off to go home to Tommy, but she could not make herself move. This conversation felt like the most important moment of her life. "I have to get off here," Sarah said, standing up slowly. "This is where I live." "Of course," David said, standing up with her. "But please think about what I said. The job would pay $60,000 a year to start, with full health insurance for you and your son. There would be opportunities to grow and learn new skills." Sarah's legs almost gave out. $60,000? That was more than twice what she made working both of her current jobs combined. With health insurance? She had not been to a doctor in 3 years because she could not afford it. Tommy had only been to the doctor when he was really sick, and even then she had to put the bills on a payment plan. "Are you serious?" Sarah whispered, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "Completely serious," David said. "I don't make jokes about business offers. This is real, Sarah. I need someone, like you. And you need a chance to build a better life for you and Tommy." Sarah stepped off the bus onto the sidewalk and David followed her. The cold evening air hit her face, but she barely noticed. She was holding the business card so tightly that her knuckles were white. "I can't believe this is happening," she said, looking up at David. "Why me? Why would you do this for someone you just met?" David's expression became serious. "Because someone helped me once when I needed it most. When I was in college working 3 jobs and barely scraping by, a professor saw something in me and gave me a chance. He recommended me for an internship. That changed my life. Without that chance, I might still be cleaning offices or waiting tables. Now I have the power to give chances to other people." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes again. She had spent so many months feeling hopeless, like she was trapped in a life of endless work and worry. The idea that someone might actually want to help her seemed impossible. "What would I have to do?" she asked. "Come in for an interview next week," David said. "Meet with my human resources team. See the office. Learn more about what the job would involve. If it feels right to both of us, we can make it official." Sarah looked down at her worn-out uniform and then back at David in his expensive suit. "I don't have nice clothes for an interview," she said quietly. "I don't even own a dress that doesn't have stains on it." "Wear what you have," David said. "I'm not hiring you for your clothes. I'm hiring you for your heart and your experience. Those are things that money can't buy." The bus had driven away, and they were standing alone at the bus stop. Sarah realized that David had gotten off the bus with her, even though this was not his stop. He had given up his own ride home to continue this conversation with her. "You missed your stop," Sarah said. "I can call a taxi," David said. "This conversation is more important than getting home a few minutes earlier." Sarah looked at the business card again. Chen Industries. She had cleaned that building so many times, never knowing that the owner had once been poor like her, never knowing that he might understand her struggles. "If I took this job," Sarah said slowly, "what would happen to the people at Danny's diner? Maria and Danny have been good to me. And what about my cleaning job? Mr. Rodriguez needs people he can count on." David was impressed by her loyalty to her current employers. Most people would quit their jobs immediately for such a better opportunity. But Sarah was worried about the people who had helped her when she needed work. "You would give them proper notice," David said. 2 weeks, or whatever is fair. And if they ever need help finding new employees, Chen Industries would be happy to help. Good employers who treat their workers well deserve support. Sarah nodded, feeling relieved. She could not bear the thought of leaving Maria and Danny without warning, or abandoning Mr. Rodriguez when he had been kind to her. "I need to think about this," Sarah said, "and I need to talk to Tommy. This would change everything for us." "Of course," David said. "Take all the time you need. My phone number is on the card. Call me when you're ready." As David called a taxi on his phone, Sarah looked toward her apartment building. Tommy was waiting for her, probably doing homework at the kitchen table. Soon, she would have to tell him about this incredible day, about the man on the bus who might change their lives forever. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez sat in her own office on the 15th floor of Chen Industries. She still could not believe this was her life now. The office had a big window that looked out over the city, and she could see the bus stop where her life had changed forever. Every morning when she arrived at work, she looked down at that spot and remembered the tired woman who had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder. That woman felt like a different person now. Sarah wore professional clothes that fit her properly and made her feel confident. Her hair was styled nicely and the dark circles under her eyes were gone. She had gained some healthy weight and looked years younger, but the biggest change was in her smile. For the first time in years, Sarah smiled easily and often. Her office door had a nameplate that read, "Sarah Martinez, Director of Employee Wellness Programs." When she first saw that title, She had cried happy tears. She had gone from being someone who needed help to someone who could help others. The programs she had created were already making a difference in dozens of families' lives. The Emergency Assistance Fund had helped 23 employees pay for unexpected medical bills, car repairs, and other emergencies. The Child Care Assistance Program was helping single parents like herself find affordable, quality care for their children. The Job Training Program was teaching employees new skills so they could advance in their careers. Every success story felt personal to Sarah because she remembered exactly how hopeless these situations could feel. Tommy was thriving in ways Sarah had never dared to hope for. He was now in a better school district because they had moved to a nice apartment with 2 bedrooms. Tommy had his own room with a real desk for homework and shelves full of books. He was taking piano lessons and had joined the school's science club. His teacher said he was one of the brightest students she had ever taught. The best part was that Sarah was home for dinner every night. She could help Tommy with his homework, read him bedtime stories, and actually spend time with him instead of just worrying about him. Tommy often talked about Mr. David, who had become like a father figure to him. David visited them regularly and took Tommy to baseball games and science museums. This morning, Sarah was reviewing applications for the new scholarship program she had proposed. Chen Industries was going to pay for college education for employees, children who showed academic promise but could not afford higher education. Tommy was still too young, but Sarah loved knowing that when the time came, he would have opportunities she never had. Her assistant knocked on the door and entered with a smile. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you. She says she heard about our programs and wants to know if we can help her." Sarah looked up from her paperwork. "Of course, send her in." A young woman entered the office, and Sarah's heart immediately recognized the look in her eyes. The woman was thin and tired, wearing a uniform from a fast food restaurant. Her hands were rough from work, and she had the same desperate expression Sarah remembered seeing in her own mirror months ago. "Hi, I'm Maria Santos," the woman said, nervously. "I work 2 jobs and I'm struggling to pay my bills. My neighbor told me about your company's programs. I don't know if I qualify for help, but I thought maybe." Sarah stood up and walked around her desk to shake Maria's hand. "Please sit down. I'm so glad you came. Tell me about your situation." As Maria told her story, single mother, working at a restaurant and cleaning offices at night, behind on rent, worried about her daughter's future, Sarah felt like she was looking into her own past. But now, instead of feeling hopeless, she felt powerful. She had the ability to help this woman the way David had helped her. "Maria," Sarah said gently, "we have several programs that might help you. But first, let me ask you something. Do you have any interest in working here at Chen Industries?" Maria's eyes went wide. "Here? But I don't have any office experience. I've only worked in restaurants and cleaning." Sarah smiled, remembering saying almost the exact same words to David on the bus. "That's exactly the kind of experience we value. We're looking for someone to help coordinate our community outreach programs. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle and can connect with people who need help." As Sarah explained the position and benefits to Maria, she thought about how David had seen potential in her when she could not see it in herself. Now she was doing the same thing for someone else. The cycle of kindness was continuing. Later that afternoon, David stopped by Sarah's office as he did most days. Their friendship had grown strong over the months, built on mutual respect and shared values. David had found in Sarah not just an excellent employee, but someone who understood the importance of using success to help others. "How was your day?" David asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Amazing," Sarah said, her face glowing with excitement. "I think I found our new community outreach coordinator. Her name is Maria, and she reminds me so much of myself. 6 months ago," David smiled, "you're going to change her life." "We're going to change her life," Sarah corrected, "just like you changed mine." David shook his head. "I just gave you an opportunity. You changed your own life through hard work and dedication. You've exceeded every expectation I had." Sarah looked out her window at the city below. Somewhere, out there were more people like she had been, working multiple jobs, exhausted, losing hope. But now there were programs to help them, and people who understood their struggles. "David," Sarah said, "I've been thinking about expanding our programs to other companies. What if we could teach other businesses how to create employee assistance programs? We could help thousands of people instead of just hundreds." David's face lit up with pride and excitement. "That's a brilliant idea. Let's start working on a proposal." As they began planning this new initiative, Sarah felt grateful for that exhausting day 6 months ago when she had fallen asleep on a bus. She had been at her lowest point, but sometimes that's when life surprises you with exactly what you need. Tommy was waiting for her at home with Mrs. Chen, who still watched him after school, but now as a paid caregiver rather than a favor. When Sarah walked through the door of their new apartment, Tommy ran to hug her as he did every day. "Mom, guess what I learned in science class today?" Tommy said excitedly. As Sarah listened to her son talk about his day, she realized that the scared, exhausted woman who had ridden the bus that night was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, happier, and ready to help others find their own second chances. The business card that had started it all was framed on her desk, a reminder that kindness between strangers could change everything. And every day, Sarah made sure to pass that kindness on to someone else who needed it.